I didn't take the job because I needed the money, although I told myself that was the reason. At 45, after a divorce that left my apartment hollow and my nights louder than my days, silence felt more valuable than comfort. My name is Richard, and I accepted a temporary position cataloging archival material in a municipal storage building scheduled for demolition, the kind of work no one else wanted because it involved isolation, dust, and long hours alone. The building sat at the edge of the city's oldest district, wedged between condemned warehouses and streets people avoided without knowing why. From the outside, it looked harmless, a concrete structure with narrow windows sealed decades ago. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt that subtle pressure behind the ears that tells you a place has learned how to hold its breath. The job was simple: inventory everything left behind before the site was cleared. Boxes of forgotten documents, rusted filing cabinets, personal effects no one had claimed. I was given a master key, a clipboard, and instructions not to work past sunset, advice delivered casually as if it were about safety rather than something else. The first day passed quietly, almost disappointingly normal, until I reached the lower level, a floor not listed on the blueprints I was given. The stairs leading down were narrow and uneven, concrete worn smooth in the center, like they'd been used far longer than the rest of the building.
The air grew cooler with each step, not damp, just stale, as if it hadn't been exchanged in years. At the bottom, rows of metal shelves stretched farther than the light from my flashlight should have allowed, packed with boxes labeled in handwriting so old it felt intentional rather than careless. As I worked, I noticed something odd. The boxes were arranged with precision, but not by date or subject. They followed a pattern, repeating every few shelves, as if someone had organized them according to a logic I couldn't see. I told myself it was coincidence, the brain reaching for order where none existed, until I realized the pattern shifted when I wasn't looking. Twice, I was certain I'd already cataloged a section, only to find it subtly rearranged when I returned. Boxes swapped, labels facing different directions, the dust disturbed just enough to suggest movement without proof. The building made no sound while this happened. No footsteps, no settling groan of old concrete, just silence so complete it rang in my skull. On the third evening, as I prepared to leave before sunset like I'd been told, I found a box on my desk that hadn't been there in the morning. It wasn't labeled. Inside were cassette tapes, neatly stacked, each one marked only with a date. None of the dates matched the building's operational years. One of them matched today. I didn't play it. I told myself curiosity was a bad habit I'd already paid for in other parts of my life. But as I locked the building and walked back to my car, I heard something I hadn't noticed before, a faint echo trailing my footsteps. Not delayed, not mismatched, just slightly heavier, as if someone were walking the same path a half second behind me, careful not to be seen. That night, at home, the sound followed me into sleep, steady and patient, and I woke just before dawn with a certainty I couldn't explain. Whatever had been archived in that building wasn't meant to be remembered, and it had noticed that I was paying attention. I returned to the building the next morning with the uneasy resolve of someone who knows they should walk away, but can't accept leaving a question unanswered. The sky was overcast, the kind of dull gray that flattens sound and makes distance feel deceptive. As I unlocked the entrance, I noticed something immediately wrong: the smell. It wasn't musty anymore. It was sharper, metallic, layered with something faintly sweet, as if the air itself had been handled too much. Inside, the lights flickered on with reluctant delay, buzzing softly, never fully settling. I checked my desk first, half expecting the tapes to be gone. They weren't, but they were no longer stacked the way I'd left them. One cassette had been moved to the top, its label rewritten in darker ink, the date replaced with a single word: listen. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at it, aware of my own breathing, aware of the silence stretching around it.
I didn't touch the tape. I told myself I wouldn't. I went back downstairs instead, drawn by the same pull that had led me there the day before, a quiet certainty that whatever was happening wasn't confined to one room. The lower level felt different now, tighter, the air pressing inward instead of sitting still. As I moved between the shelves, I realized the pattern had changed again. The boxes were closer together, reducing the space between aisles just enough to notice. I had to turn my shoulders slightly to pass. I told myself it was imagination until I reached the end of the row and found a shelf where there hadn't been one before, blocking my way entirely. The metal was cold to the touch, colder than the surrounding air, and when I leaned closer, I noticed fingerprints in the dust that weren't mine, long and narrow, pressed deep as if whoever left them had leaned there for support. I backed away, heart thudding, and that was when I heard it clearly for the first time, breathing. Not behind me, not ahead of me, but everywhere at once, a slow intake followed by a longer exhale, synchronized with nothing human. The sound didn't echo, it absorbed sound. I forced myself to keep moving, cataloging boxes with shaking hands, because stopping felt worse than continuing. The labels grew stranger the deeper I went, names crossed out and rewritten, dates scratched over until the cardboard thinned, symbols pressed into the surface hard enough to warp it.
Several boxes were marked with my name, not printed, written. Same uneven slant I recognized from my own handwriting on tired days. I dropped the clipboard. The sound should have echoed. It didn't. The breathing stopped. In its place came a low vibration under my feet, subtle but steady, like something large shifting its weight beneath the floor. I ran then, not back upstairs, but sideways, between aisles that no longer lined up the way they should have, shelves angling inward, forcing me through a path that narrowed with every step. The lights dimmed behind me in sequence, not flickering, but shutting off deliberately, guiding me forward. At the far end of the storage level, I found a door I had never seen before, recessed into the concrete, unmarked, its surface scarred with shallow grooves that formed repeating arcs, like someone had traced the same motion over and over. The vibration intensified as I approached, humming through my chest, through my teeth. Against every instinct, I placed my hand on the door. It was warm, not room temperature, body warm. The breathing returned, closer now, layered, as if more than one set of lungs were involved. I pulled my hand back, and the door opened anyway, just enough to reveal darkness beyond it. Not empty darkness, but dense, textured, shifting slowly, as if stirred by a current. From inside came a sound that wasn't a voice, but carried intent, a dragging whisper that scraped directly against my thoughts rather than my ears.
It wasn't speaking words, it was repeating a rhythm, the same rhythm I'd heard trailing my footsteps the night before. I stumbled back, gasping, and the door shut softly, almost gently, as if disappointed. The lights snapped back on all at once. The shelves returned to their original positions. The aisle widened. Silence settled. Shaking, I fled upstairs, locked the building, and sat in my car until my pulse slowed enough to drive. That night, I didn't sleep. At exactly 3:17 a.m., my phone turned on by itself and began recording audio. I listened the next morning. Under the hum of my apartment, beneath my own breathing, there was another sound, steady and patient, the same rhythm, closer now, as if whatever I'd encountered in that building had learned the distance to my bed and was measuring how long it would take to cross it. I told myself I wouldn't go back, and for most of the morning I almost believed it. I showered, made coffee, tried to restore the rhythm of a normal day, but the sound from the recording stayed lodged in my head, that steady, patient cadence that felt less like noise and more like intent. By noon, I realized something worse than fear had taken hold. Anticipation. Whatever I had disturbed in that building wasn't finished with me, and some part of me needed to know why. I returned just before dusk, breaking the only rule they had given me, the sky already darkening in a way that felt accelerated, as if the light were being drained rather than fading naturally. Inside, the building greeted me with silence so complete it felt rehearsed. My desk was empty. The tapes were gone. In their place lay my clipboard, open to a page I didn't remember writing. It contained a list of times, not dates, written in descending order, each one circled heavily. The last time on the list matched the moment I was standing there. As I watched, the second to last time began to bleed through the paper, ink seeping outward as if freshly written beneath the surface. I didn't wait to understand it. I went downstairs, driven by the certainty that whatever explanation existed lived below ground. The lower level no longer felt like storage. The shelves had been pulled back, widening the aisles unnaturally, creating long corridors that vanished into shadow. The lights buzzed overhead, dimmer now, humming in the same rhythm I had heard on the recording, syncing my heartbeat to something that wasn't mine. The farther I walked, the warmer the air became, heavy and stale, carrying that metallic sweetness that now felt unmistakably organic. I began to hear voices, not speaking, not forming words, but murmuring in layered tones, as if multiple conversations were happening just out of reach. Each time I stopped to listen, they stopped too. Each time I moved, they resumed.
I understood then that they weren't sounds in the room. They were responses. At the far end of the level, beyond where the shelves should have ended, I found a cleared space, a circle of bare concrete worn smooth, surrounded by boxes stacked deliberately outward, like an audience frozen mid-exit. Every box was labeled with a name. I recognized some of them from local records I'd skimmed out of boredom days earlier. Former employees, inspectors, contractors. And then I saw mine. Fresh cardboard, clean edges. My name, written with confident familiarity. The breathing returned, louder now, layered, close enough that I felt moisture against my neck, though nothing touched me. The temperature dropped suddenly, my breath fogging in front of my face, and the lights dimmed until the circle was the only illuminated space left. From the concrete floor came a low vibration that traveled upward through my legs, my spine, settling behind my eyes. Images flooded my thoughts without warning. People standing where I stood now, holding clipboards, holding keys, holding nothing at all frozen in the same moment of realization. They hadn't been archived. They had been recorded. The voices grew clearer then, overlapping, synchronizing, no longer murmurs, but deliberate echoes, repeating fragments of thoughts I recognized as my own doubts, my regrets, my unspoken questions. The building wasn't storing objects, it was collecting attention.
I staggered backward, breaking the circle, and the reaction was immediate. The shelves began to shift inward, metal grinding against concrete, closing off exits I hadn't noticed before. The lights flickered violently. From the darkness beyond the circle, shapes began to resolve. Tall, indistinct forms that bent where bodies shouldn't bend, moving not toward me, but around me, reinforcing the boundary I had stepped into. Panic finally cut through curiosity. I ran, dodging narrowing aisles, the floor vibrating with movement beneath it, the breathing now a chorus pressing against my skull. When I reached the stairs, I realized they were longer than before, each step stretching just enough to slow me down, to test how badly I wanted to leave. I burst through the exit door and into the night air, gasping, shaking, certain I had escaped by seconds. In my car, hands locked around the steering wheel, I noticed my phone vibrating. A new audio file had appeared, time-stamped for tomorrow night. I didn't press play. I didn't need to. I already knew the rhythm. And as I drove away, I saw the building's lights turn on one by one behind me, not in warning, not in alarm, but in invitation, as if confident that now that I understood what it was doing, I would come back willingly. I didn't go back to the building immediately after listening to the recording, and that hesitation marked the moment when fear finally overtook curiosity.
The sound stayed with me in a way I couldn't shake, not echoing in my ears, but settling somewhere deeper, sinking itself to my breathing, my pulse, my thoughts when I tried to sit still. Over the next days, normal life became difficult to perform. Conversations felt delayed, like I was responding a half-second too late. Reflections lingered in glass surfaces after I moved past them. At night, I heard the rhythm again, not loud, not intrusive, just present, steady, patient, as if something were waiting for me to notice it, noticing me. I tried to drown it out with noise, television, music, running water, but the rhythm adapted, threading itself through everything until it felt less like sound and more like structure. On the third day, I received an email from the municipal office confirming my request for archived documents. The message was brief, impersonal, and ended with a warning disguised as protocol. Access granted for one final review only.
The phrasing bothered me. Final implied closure, but nothing about this situation felt capable of ending cleanly. I returned to the building just before sunset again, the sky bruised purple and gray, the air heavy with an approaching storm that never quite arrived. The entrance door was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it the last time. Inside, the lights were already on, brighter than usual, casting harsh shadows that made the hallways look narrower, longer, subtly altered.
My desk had been moved closer to the stairwell leading down, as if encouraging efficiency. On it sat a folder bearing no official stamp, only my name printed cleanly in a font I didn't recognize. Inside were photographs, grainy and poorly lit, showing the lower level at different points in time. I recognized the shelves, the aisles, the circle, but in each photo there were people standing where I had stood, always facing away from the camera, always positioned precisely within the cleared space. The dates on the back of the photos spanned decades. None of the faces were visible, but the posture was identical in every image, shoulders slightly hunched, heads tilted forward in the same subtle angle of listening. My hands shook as I turned the last photograph. It was undated. The person in the image was wearing the same jacket I had on that moment. I didn't hear the breathing then. I felt it. The air around me compressed, thickened, carrying that metallic sweetness that now felt unmistakably alive. The stairs down seemed closer than before, the descent steeper, each step deeper than memory suggested. The lower level had changed again. The shelves were gone entirely, replaced by smooth concrete walls that curved inward, funneling attention toward a single point at the center. The circle had returned, but larger now, the concrete polished to a dull sheen by repeated use. Around it, the boxes were stacked higher, tighter, forming a crude amphitheater. Every box was labeled with a name. There were more than before. Hundreds. I searched for mine and found it immediately, closer to the circle now, its position elevated. The realization hit slowly, painfully clear. The building adjusted its structure based on how deeply someone engaged. Attention reshaped it. Fear refined it. Understanding finalized it. The rhythm grew louder, no longer subtle, vibrating through the floor, through my legs, into my chest. The voices returned, not overlapping anymore, but unified, forming a low, resonant murmur that vibrated inside my skull. I understood fragments then, not words, but intent. This wasn't a place that trapped people against their will. It created conditions where staying felt necessary, where leaving felt incomplete. Every person whose name filled those boxes had reached the same conclusion I was approaching now, that walking away without answers was worse than whatever waited inside. The lights dimmed until only the circle remained illuminated. The air grew warm, heavy, intimate. I stepped closer before I realized I was moving. The concrete beneath my feet pulsed faintly, like a living surface responding to proximity. Images surged through my mind again, clearer now. People standing in that circle, speaking aloud thoughts they believed were private, memories they had never shared, regrets that still shaped them. The building wasn't consuming them.
It was recording resonance, preserving the moment a person became fully aware of being observed and chose not to flee. I reached the edge of the circle and stopped. For the first time since this began, the rhythm faltered, just slightly, as if reassessing. The breathing paused, the voices quieted. In that silence, I understood the final rule. Stepping into the circle was consent. Not stepping in was refusal. The building didn't chase, it didn't force, it waited. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, every instinct screaming that leaving incomplete would haunt me forever. The lights flickered once, violently, and the rhythm surged back with renewed intensity, urging, inviting, promising clarity. I turned and ran. The exit resisted, the door swelling in its frame, the air thickening, the sound pressing against me like hands trying to guide me back. When I burst outside, the silence hit hard enough to stagger me. The building behind me went dark all at once. No lights, no sound, no invitation. Just an empty concrete shell under a bruised sky. I knew then it wasn't finished. It had simply accepted my refusal as part of its record.
and somewhere inside that darkened structure, my absence had been noted. I believed, for exactly one night, that leaving the building had been enough. That illusion shattered slowly, the way deep fear does, not with a scream, but with subtle confirmations that something had followed me home without needing to move.
The next morning, my apartment felt rearranged, not visibly, not enough to prove anything, but the space between objects felt altered, distances shortened, angles tightened, as if the room had learned how to compress itself. The rhythm returned while I stood brushing my teeth, faint but undeniable, not coming from the walls or the pipes, but from inside my chest, aligning itself with my breath until stopping it felt dangerous. I skipped work, ignored calls, and spent hours pacing, replaying every moment in the lower level, searching for the instant where I might have agreed to something without realizing it. By afternoon, my phone displayed missed calls from numbers with no caller ID, all clustered around the same minute. When I checked my voicemail, there was only one message, several minutes long, filled with silence layered so thick it hummed. Halfway through, I heard my own breathing, slow and measured, recorded from an angle that suggested proximity. I smashed the phone against the counter, but the sound didn't stop. It continued, now coming from the apartment itself, vibrating through the floorboards, the walls, the ceiling, turning my living space into a smaller version of that circle I had refused to enter. As night fell, the lights dimmed without flickering, settling into a low glow that flattened shadows instead of casting them. I realized then that the building hadn't needed me to step inside the circle because I had brought the circle with me.
Attention wasn't bound by location. It was portable. The realization came with a surge of clarity so sharp it felt like pain. The structure cataloged people not by proximity, but by sustained awareness. The more you listened, the more clearly it could listen back. Determined to end it, I returned one final time, not out of curiosity, but desperation. The building stood exactly as I had left it, dark, silent, unremarkable. The kind of place people pass daily without seeing. Inside, the lower level greeted me without resistance. The circle was gone. The boxes were gone. In their place stood a single recorder on the floor, its red light blinking steadily. I didn't need to touch it to know what it contained. The air thickened, the rhythm surged, no longer subtle, no longer patient. The voices returned, not murmurs now, but layered echoes forming a single intent, pressing one truth into my mind with relentless precision. The record must complete itself. I understood then that the building wasn't evil, wasn't alive in any way that mattered. Attention wasn't bound by location. It was portable. The realization came with a surge of clarity so sharp it felt like pain. The structure cataloged people not by proximity, but by sustained awareness. The more you listened, the more clearly it could listen back. Determined to end it, I returned one final time, not out of curiosity, but desperation. The building stood exactly as I had left it, dark, silent, unremarkable. The kind of place people pass daily without seeing. Inside, the lower level greeted me without resistance. The circle was gone. The boxes were gone. In their place stood a single recorder on the floor, its red light blinking steadily. I didn't need to touch it to know what it contained. The air thickened, the rhythm surged, no longer subtle, no longer patient. The voices returned, not murmurs now, but layered echoes forming a single intent, pressing one truth into my mind with relentless precision. The record must complete itself. I understood then that the building wasn't evil, wasn't alive in any way that mattered. It was a system designed to preserve moments of awareness, to trap the instant a person fully perceived being observed, and chose either to submit or to deny it. Every refusal left a gap. Every gap demanded resolution. I picked up the recorder. The moment my fingers closed around it, the sound stopped. Absolute silence flooded the space, so complete it felt like relief. I pressed play. There was no static this time, no rhythm, no breathing.
Only my voice, calm, steady, speaking words I had never consciously formed, describing the lower level, the circle, the boxes, the precise moment where fear sharpened into understanding. As I listened, I felt something loosen inside my chest, a pressure I hadn't known how to name. When the recording ended,
The light on the device went dark. The building exhaled, concrete settling with a final exhausted groan. I left without resistance, the exit opening easily, the night air outside crisp and ordinary. In the days that followed, the rhythm faded, the sounds stopped. My apartment returned to normal proportions. Life resumed its uneven, imperfect pace. Months later, I read a brief notice buried in a local paper. The municipal storage building had been demolished without incident. No remains found, no anomalies reported. Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself listening too carefully to the silence, afraid that attention itself might be enough to start the process again. Because now I know the truth that building taught me. Some systems don't haunt you because you trespass. They haunt you because you notice them long enough to be noticed in return. I believed for exactly one night that leaving the building had been enough. That illusion shattered slowly, the way deep fear does, not with a scream, but with subtle confirmations that something had followed me home without needing to move.
The next morning, my apartment felt rearranged. Not visibly, not enough to prove anything, but the space between objects felt altered, distances shortened, angles tightened, as if the room had learned how to compress itself. The rhythm returned while I stood brushing my teeth, faint but undeniable, not coming from the walls or the pipes, but from inside my chest, aligning itself with my breath, until stopping it felt dangerous. I skipped work, ignored calls, and spent hours pacing, replaying every moment in the lower level, searching for the instant where I might have agreed to something without realizing it. By afternoon, my phone displayed missed calls from numbers with no caller ID, all clustered around the same minute. When I checked my voicemail, there was only one message, several minutes long, filled with silence layered so thick it hummed. Halfway through, I heard my own breathing, slow and measured, recorded from an angle that suggested proximity. I smashed the phone against the counter, but the sound didn't stop. It continued, now coming from the apartment itself, vibrating through the floorboards, the walls, the ceiling, turning my living space into a smaller version of that circle I had refused to enter. As night fell, the lights dimmed without flickering, settling into a low glow that flattened shadows instead of casting them. I realized then that the building hadn't needed me to step inside the circle, because I had brought the circle with me.
Attention wasn't bound by location, it was portable. The realization came with a surge of clarity so sharp it felt like pain. The structure cataloged people not by proximity, but by sustained awareness. The more you listened, the more clearly it could listen back. Determined to end it, I returned one final time, not out of curiosity, but desperation. The building stood exactly as I had left it, dark, silent, unremarkable, the kind of place people pass daily without seeing. Inside, the lower level greeted me without resistance. The circle was gone. The boxes were gone. In their place stood a single recorder on the floor, its red light blinking steadily. I didn't need to touch it to know what it contained. The air thickened, the rhythm surged, no longer subtle, no longer patient. The voices returned, not murmurs now, but layered echoes forming a single intent, pressing one truth into my mind with relentless precision. The record must complete itself. I understood then that the building wasn't evil, wasn't alive in any way that mattered. It was a system designed to preserve moments of awareness, to trap the instant a person fully perceived being observed and chose either to submit or to deny it. Every refusal left a gap. Every gap demanded resolution. I picked up the recorder. The moment my fingers closed around it, the sound stopped. Absolute silence flooded the space, so complete it felt like relief. I pressed play. There was no static this time, no rhythm, no breathing.
Only my voice, calm, steady, speaking words I had never consciously formed, describing the lower level, the circle, the boxes, the precise moment where fear sharpened into understanding. As I listened, I felt something loosen inside my chest, a pressure I hadn't known how to name. When the recording ended, the light on the device went dark. The building exhaled, concrete settling with a final, exhausted groan. I left without resistance, the exit opening easily, the night air outside crisp
and ordinary. In the days that followed, the rhythm faded. The sounds stopped. My apartment returned to normal proportions. Life resumed its uneven, imperfect pace. Months later, I read a brief notice buried in a local paper. The municipal storage building had been demolished without incident. No remains found. No anomalies reported. Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself listening too carefully to the silence, afraid that attention itself might be enough to start the process again. Because now I know the truth that building taught me. Some systems don't haunt you because you trespass. They haunt you because you notice them long enough to be noticed in return. For a long time, I convinced myself the end had already happened, that demolition meant closure, that dust and concrete had buried whatever logic governed that place. That belief lasted until the first night I woke up without knowing why. No sound had disturbed me. No dream lingered. I was simply awake, heart beating with a careful precision that felt rehearsed. The room was dark, but not empty. The silence carried weight again, the same density I had felt underground, the same sensation of being inside something that was paying attention. I stayed still, listening, counting my breaths, trying to determine whether the rhythm was coming from me or settling into me. When I finally turned my head, I saw the recorder on my bedside table. It hadn't been there when I went to sleep. It was the same model, the same scuffed casing, the same small crack near the microphone grill. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The red light blinked once, slowly, then stopped. In that moment, understanding arrived not as fear, but as inevitability. The building hadn't needed to survive physically. Its function didn't rely on walls or shelves or circles carved into concrete. It relied on continuity. The next days unfolded with subtle distortions I couldn't explain to anyone without sounding unhinged. Conversations repeated fragments of themselves, people pausing mid-sentence to rephrase thoughts they had already spoken, eyes unfocused, as if listening to something else. Elevators stopped between floors longer than necessary. Hallways in familiar places felt longer, slightly curved, narrowing toward unseen centers. Once you noticed it, you couldn't stop noticing it. I realized then what the system truly preserved. Not individuals, but awareness itself, passed forward like an echo that learned how to reproduce. The recorder began appearing more frequently, never in the same place twice, always close enough to be noticed, never close enough to be unavoidable. I never pressed play again. That choice mattered, or at least it felt like it did. Weeks later, I received an email from a stranger who claimed to have found my name while cataloging materials in a temporary archive on the other side of the city. He asked if we had worked together. He asked if I remembered the lower levels. I didn't reply. I knew better now. Engagement was the mechanism. Curiosity was the door. One evening, as I walked home under streetlights that hummed too softly, I understood the final shape of the horror. The system didn't hunt, it didn't trap, it trained. Each person who encountered it learned how to listen differently afterward, how to notice gaps, how to feel the subtle pressure of being observed. Those people became nodes, living extensions of a process that no longer needed a building to house it. The rhythm faded completely after that realization, not because it was gone, but because it had synchronized perfectly. Silence no longer meant absence. It meant completion.
Sometimes when I stand very still, I feel it again, not as fear, not as sound, but as alignment, the faint comfort of knowing exactly where the center is, in choosing, every day, not to step into it. And that choice, fragile and deliberate, is the only thing that keeps the recording from starting again. I don't know how long my choice will continue to matter. Some nights are quiet enough that I almost forget what it felt like to be noticed. In other nights, the silence presses in just enough to remind me that systems like that never truly end. They only change form. The building is gone, but attention is portable, and awareness has a way of repeating itself when someone listens too closely for too long.
I've learned to live carefully inside sound, to let silence pass without inspecting it, to walk away from places that feel too precise, too patient. If this story followed you all the way here, it means you listened, and that alone is something to be aware of. Like the video, leave a comment with what you think the system really was, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.